genomics and immortalism, the Grail quest, if you want to call it that, is rooted in the Old Testament and in the figure of Melchizedek. I equate it with the figure of Melchizedek rather than the figure of Methuselah.
Right.
Well, this is the comment that I would make about that. Those human beings who are allowed to have a direct visionary experience of nature through these sublime plants experience immortality. Therefore, they don't need to seek it.
They've already found it.
They have already found it. And they experience immortality. I can say it myself. I have experienced immortality, not in the sense that the body that is standing here talking to you on the telephone is going to live forever, but in the sense that my consciousness is part of a living body of this planet that will continue for thousands and millions of years. And so I have experienced the immortality of the earth, and I am a cell that will be constantly reborn in one form or another in that living organism. Now, anyone who has had that experience, and it's not an uncommon thing. Many people read many reports in these books of people who have taken ayahuasca or magic mushrooms. Anyone who has had that experience is not going to be going on a quest for one immortal physical body. The motivation, do you know what the motivation of that quest is? Fear of death.
There you go, exactly, yeah.
And when you take this, when you enter this visionary trance, when you allow your ego to die and melt, and you become like a tree, like a stone, like an animal, like a fly, like a star, you become momentarily part of all that lives, and all that lives in you. The fear of death is absolutely taken away from you. And it's inconceivable that you would then turn around and go on this ridiculous quest to create a physical instrument that would live forever. And so that's the real battle. That is really the spiritual insanity behind genomics and immortality. It's a fear of death.
Well, I
agree. So I believe that those people who fear death also fear the visionary experience, because you have to go through a kind of death in order to have that experience, as everyone knows.
Yeah, exactly. And that's very interesting. So to kind of tie this back round together again, what you're saying here also is then, if it was true that these people were secretly behind the scenes dealing with these kinds of substances, we would not have a world that looks like it looks like today, because they, from that experience, would have learned much of these things that we have talked about during this program here, and also consequently then not have this fear of death, and not would have this kind of drive to control everything and restrict everything. That is what you're saying here, right?
That is exactly what I'm saying. And that is why I personally, I don't have any proof. I can't prove that, there aren't Jesuits or there aren't people at the Vatican who, do secret ceremonies with psychoactive plants. I can't prove that. I can't have no physical evidence, but it seems totally illogical to me that anyone, well, let me speak for myself. I myself and the hundreds of people that I have met who have taken ingested psychoactive mushrooms, or even taken LSD for that matter, have never occurred to us to control the experience of another person.
Yeah.
It's just completely antithetical to the nature of that experience.
Yeah.
So I reject that theory, and I strongly suggest that we consider that the people who are turning the world into a simulated nightmare with all this archontic stuff they're doing are people who are afraid of nature, they're afraid of their own bodies, they're afraid of their own organisms. And unfortunately, my friend, fear is a very powerful motivator.
Indeed.
So unless we can be motivated by love and inspiration more than they are motivated by fear, our chances of winning this struggle are not going to be so good.
It's logical what you're saying there, because again, if we look at the fruits of what they are doing, it has been a suppression of the feminine and even the female in many cases. It's everything that has to do with the life-giving force here. I mean, nature is not something that can be controlled, and for that reason, I think that these people are also afraid of that. Then, as a consequence, Monsanto, if we look at what they're doing, I mean, if we really kind of make this as simple as possible, what they're doing is they're trying to control nature. They're trying to, with the Terminator seed technology, all of this is about control, and everything that is not controllable, they're afraid of it and consequently want to ban that or outlaw it, whatever.
Exactly. You showed it very well in your film on the Grail when you pointed out the resemblance of the sign Aries to the ovaries.
Right.
And you pointed out that, cloning is not a glorification of human intelligence. It's not a step that humanity reaches where we become like gods and we're able to create. Cloning is a reaction of fear.
Yeah.
It's a reaction of fear and ignorance. Anyone who would want to clone anything must be afraid and ignorant of the natural processes of reproduction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And so there's a great deal of fear. The people who are now, we're facing a very, very big shutdown. And I say again, I don't advocate that everyone in the human community take psychoactive mushrooms. It may not be for everyone, but I certainly advocate that they respect those who do take them, and that they respect the right of every single person to make that choice to take them or not take them.
Yeah.
Just like you have the right to make the choice if you want to eat potatoes. But, that choice to eat potatoes is going to be taken away from you, and you're going to have to eat synthetic potatoes.
Yeah.
So we are coming very close to a real showdown here. I don't know what form it's going to take, but it's intense.
It is. I mean, again, it's worth mentioning that as things are laid out right now, at least, Codex Alimentarius is planned to go in, I think, December 31st, 2009.
That's right.
And this has been going on since basically the 60s, 70s, and we have not heard that much about it until just a few years ago. It's starting.
Just a few years ago. It's finally coming in next year, 2009. It comes into all of its programs are supposed to be implemented, and that is very, very frightening. Well, when I heard that, my blood went cold.
Yeah.
That was a frightening piece of information. Yet I think at the same time, we really have enough networking power at our hands right now with the internet and with the kind of things that you're doing. We have enough networking power to make people aware of what is being done to them.
Yeah.
I personally don't believe that this can be pulled off unless people are blind.
Exactly.
Yeah, as long as people are deceived and blind, they have a good chance of succeeding. But the more people know what the agenda is, the less chance they have of succeeding.
Exactly. And worth mentioning also is that, in many cases, unfortunately, man and humanity, so to speak, has to learn the hard way, and we have to, actually potentially go into a period where they actually, enforce this in some way, and a consequence of that might be that we, revolt against this in one way or another. And it's never too late to turn back to that. I mean, again, we know that they're saving seeds up at Svalbard right now, so we know that there still is, it's hope. That's what I want to say, at least. It's still hope, although they will never succeed in banning nature. Nature will always find a way to creep in and succeed over all of this. That's how I feel.
Yes, they will never overcome nature, but it's important to bear in mind that they think they can. And when you're dealing with people who are insane, and I believe that this is really the case, that I believe that many of the people who are implementing these programs and who have conceived these programs are really insane. They have really lost their minds, and they're living in a state of fear.
Yeah.
It's good to know that you're dealing with somebody that's insane, and you have to take extreme measures against such people.
Yeah. A finishing question or comment here before we round things up for the first segment here. You mentioned also about, that they're insane, and you mentioned sanity. And do you think that because of our disconnection to nature, this is what slowly have kind of been evolving and growing up to the point where we are today, where we're, have people in power that are totally, as you say, they're insane basically. They're they want to control everything. But do you think that has its roots in the fact that we've more and more been disconnected from everything that is natural? Do you think that's the case?
Well, I think it's a direct consequence of the taboo, which is told in the story of Genesis. And I think, as you know, I wrote my book, Not in His Image, Against Religion, because I think that religion has been, especially Judeo-Christian religion in the West, has been the main instrument in bringing us to this point. Yes, if we live on a planet that is alive and intelligent and mostly populated by plants, and we depend on those plants, to eat and to survive and to live, then I think it's easy to see that we could also depend on those plants to keep our intelligence attuned to the planet itself. And by taking away that attunement and that connection, and by denying it, the human species was put on a course of self-destruction, which we are now coming to the end of.
Full circle. Very interesting. John, we're going to continue talking a little bit more about the members section. We're going to talk more about Edwin Salter, a very interesting discovery that you have made, and I'm looking forward very much going into this, because it's a fascinating subject. So stay tuned, members. A lot more is coming. But John, tell us a little bit about some of the books that you have out there for us, and also about your website before we round things off here in the first segment.
Well, primarily my book, Not in His Image, is the one that would speak most to the subjects we've talked about today, because it deals with two things. One, the origins of religion and the glorification of suffering. That is one of the tools religion uses to control people, to justify suffering, to convince people that it's good for them to suffer, and that God wants them to suffer, and that suffering has a redemptive value. So as you know, I've attacked this very strongly in my book, Not in His Image, and I've also talked about the use of sacred plants in the pre-Christian and pre-Judaic mysteries of Europe. So that's still pretty much my most important message. And then, of course, on metahistory.org, my site, those who want to follow this conversation should go to the menu bar and click on Psychonautics. And there they'll see a picture of Maria Sabina, of Joanna Harcourt Smith, and of a mushroom entity. And they will get an explanation of the whole Wasson thesis from the very beginnings in the 1930s up until 1965, 66, when LSD was banned. And so I'm trying to just give that background, because I think that story is very helpful for us to see what we're up against today.
Very good. The website's, again, metahistory.org, and also check out futureprimitive.org, the accompanying website to that. Thank you very much for this segment, John, and stay with us, and we'll talk more after the break.
Great. Thank you.